Right, an inquiry into racism in the country's property sector has been delayed amid new changes into laws governing the sector. The 7 hearings that have taken place so far have been reportedly poorly attended, with more provinces still to go. A comprehensive report would be finalized after all remaining provinces have been accounted for. The March hearings have not been without controversy following the suspension of the country's apex property body, the Property Practitioners Regulatory Authority CEO Mamodupi Mohlala, on March 25th. Joining us now to explain how this affects transformation and property owners is Property Practitioners Regulatory Authority Executive of Education and Training, Mfundo Daki. Mfundo, good evening, and thank you very much for your time and for joining us tonight on In Focus. What informs this particular inquiry and why it had to be done?
Good evening to you and the viewers. Basically, the hearings stem from an incident which was widely reported sometime last year. There was an allegation in Cape Town of a racism incident whereby a member of the public who's black wanted to access a property which was advertised as being available for rental. And then the estate agent who was assisting him at the time, when they were corresponding, was not aware of the fact that the prospective tenant is actually black. And then she later discovered that this individual wanted to access this property for rental and was actually black. And then she mentioned that the owner of the property does not want black tenants. And then obviously that incident incensed this gentleman. The matter was all over the social media, and then it was then brought to our attention. And then as the regulator, we were then compelled to do something about it. With a team of investigators were dispatched to Cape Town to investigate this incident. So the complainant, as well as the estate agencies that employed this lady who was assisting this gentleman, were actually interviewed. And then we also got representations from the attorney of this lady, or the agent who was actually assisting this gentleman.
Yeah. Now, after having gone through those processes, why do you think there's been a lackluster response to the hearings that you're broadly conducting into the racism in this space?
I think on our side we tried to disseminate information in respect of bringing awareness about the hearings that we wanted to conduct. We've got the Facebook page, we've got the website, we even utilize some newspapers to bring about some awareness, but the turnout has not been that good. But maybe there's a number of issues. It could be that because we conducted these hearings during the week, it could be that perhaps we'll need to change our strategy and try to, if possible, but that is something that we're still going to discuss, opt to conduct the hearings maybe over the weekends. Maybe that is when we might get, the turnout which is quite satisfactory, yes.
Yeah. Now, days after you started with the hearings, then you've put the Chief Executive, Mamodupi Mohlala, on precautionary suspension. Is there a relationship between what you're conducting as a probe and putting the CEO on suspension? What is the reason for his suspension?
Well, I think that is an issue that perhaps I would request that it be directed to maybe the institution itself through the acting CEO or the board. But there is no, from my understanding, correlation between her suspension and the hearings which are taking place.
All right. And in as far then as the outcomes of these hearings, When do you expect that these would come out? And what is the legal status of those outcomes in as far as actions that would then ensue thereafter?
As you correctly mentioned during your introduction, we've conducted about 7 hearings thus far. We've got 3 remaining areas that we need to go to. That is Polokwane, Nelspruit, and Rustenburg. And we anticipate that process will be finalized during June. And immediately thereafter, we'll need to finalize the compilation of the report, which will obviously have some recommendations on what we feel should be, the best way of handling the situation. That report will be tabled before the board of the PPRA, that is the Property Practitioners Regulatory Authority. And then once the board has interrogated and considered the report, it will then be submitted to the Minister of Human Settlements. And then we're hoping that the report will then eventually be submitted and considered before Parliament, so that Parliament can also see and understand the gravity of the situation and decide on what sort of measures need to be put in place, in addition to what currently exists as a regulatory framework.
Without preempting, of course, the outcomes of the hearings, but the 7 that you've been through right now, I mean, what are you hearing? There are several reports that are saying, for example, during day-to-day operations, there would be black people being called monkeys, big jokes, and so on and so forth being conducted. Is that the sense of what you're getting coming out of the hearing so far?
Basically, what we've been able to decipher and establish from the hearings that we've conducted so far is that this issue of racism in the property sector is two-dimensional. In the one hand, it affects the ordinary members of the public who happen to be black, and then on the other hand, it affects property practitioners who could either be intern or candidate property practitioners, or non-principal property practitioners who are black and who operate under the, who are employed by white estate agencies. So in respect of ordinary black members of the public, the issue is that similar to what is alleged to have occurred in Cape Town, whereby this particular gentleman was barred or excluded from accessing this property. So that is one issue, that people are excluded from accessing properties on the basis that they are black, that is the members of the public. And then on the other hand, property practitioners who are employed by white estate agencies, their complaint is that they are actually confined in townships. You must understand that the remuneration of estate agents is based on the payment of a commission.
Yes.
So if you sell a property in the township, obviously the commission will be less compared to when you sell a property in the more affluent areas,
yes,
or upmarket areas. So that is one of the complaints those are the complaints that have been brought to our attention. And then I think another one is that there's an allegation that there appears to be some kind of collusion between property developers and the body corporates who happen to be giving or have a preference of giving mandates to white established estate agencies.
I see.
And black practitioners are complaining about that they are being excluded, and they need some action to be taken in that regard.
Mfundo Daki, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on. He's the Executive of Education and Training at the Property Practitioners Regulatory Authority.